Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our viewers this particular week, this Saturday evening, and welcome to the show. That's Abdurraheem Green.
And that's Abdul Haqq Baker. And this is
A Piece of Cake.
A Piece of Cake.
How's your week been, Abdurraheem?
It's fast, bro. I just can't believe how quickly it goes. Like, you know, when you have something regular, like a regular show like this, it just makes you realize how quickly time goes, you know.
And we're both doing twice a week because you do Friday as well.
Yeah, and you know, the Friday one, I sort of try and prepare a little bit for it. And the weird thing is, it's like through the week, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this and that. And then it, like, Friday morning's there and it's like, oh my God, wait a minute. Let me read something, you know. But yeah, alhamdulillah, you know.
No, today, you know what? After last week's conversation, I was sitting and thinking today, what can we discuss to further what we were looking at? And one thing that was important to me, and you know, I like to keep archives. I actually looked at some of my notes from secondary school, okay, my religious education. And because we both went to Roman Catholic school, I looked at the detail that we went into, and subhanallah, was that a preparation in the sense that for the discipline of how we studied when we first came to the deen? And I felt that we should discuss that, because today with social media, there are many advantages, but as you and I discussed last week, there's not much reading or that religious instruction really sitting down and learning. Everyone sort of feels that you've got to go to a Dar al-Ulum or you've got to go to a university to do that study, when really, in essence, there should be a basic minimum that we're studying. When we were studying in the 90s, going to your study circles and everything, we were actually studying. We were actually coming and building up upon studies, and okay, we had a cassette, but we would have our notes, or we'd go back and we would listen. So, for example, Abdurraheem, look, I've got my my religious studies books from Mr. Jackson, and I'm if you look here, this is from 1980. These are my, and I'll open it so nobody thinks that I'm faking it. But all of this handwritten note was from the 1980s on studying. And I think that I wanted to ask you concerning that. What was your experience of studying then? And do you share the idea, or what I'm saying, that there should be?
First of all, I burnt all my notebooks, you know, in textbooks, in a collective with everybody else. I think we had a big pile and burnt them out of collective joy.
They do that here in Saudi.
The school had finished, so you know, proper book burning going on there out of. I think when I ended up at university, I realized, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I'm fed up to the teeth of studying. I you know, like the whole academic thing, I was really fed up. I had no stomach for it at all. Which I said this before in a previous podcast with you. I think, or maybe it was the first one, which is ironic because then, you know, having become Muslim, I never really studied quite so much in my life, you know, mashallah. But that's the difference between something you're passionate about and something you love, you know. But I think that sort of level of, I mean, you know, look, in my school, again, you know, I went to Ampleforth College, which is a Roman Catholic monastic boarding school, not so far from, you know, not so far from Newcastle, where, by the way, I'm heading up on Monday to Newcastle for like 3-4 days, inshallah. So yeah, not too far from there. And so we were the last school, Abdul Haqq, bro, in the country that actually did church history as an what was it? There was a level between A level and O level. I think they called it AS. Yeah, that's it, AS. So yeah, we were the only school left in the whole country doing it. So definitely, I think that the whole religious side of it was not just something in my school that was squeezed in. You see, a lot of Muslim schools, a lot of Islamic schools, from what I have heard, they have this very, very, you know, national curriculum-based curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Islamic studies is just like squeezed in here and there. You know, maybe they'll do an Islamic A level and a bit of Quran, right? But to be honest, when I think about my school, it was way, way more than that. It was the whole ethic, because it was a monastic boarding school, right? So we had, you know, every morning there were morning prayers, there was regular mass, there was regular evening prayers. And there were lots of things built into our everyday life, to be honest, right? We were, in a sense, part of the monastery.
Right.
And so religious study definitely was not something that was just sidelined or squeezed in, right? There was a whole ethos there of religiosity. And the funny thing was, I actually liked it. I liked the religious side. I didn't get the theology of Catholicism. I love the idea. What I did like about the idea of monasticism, and I'll be honest, right? Aspects of monasticism still appeal to me, right? And you can see why historically, you know, Allah mentioned it in the Quran, that Allah mentioned it was like a bid'ah, that Allah did not enjoin it upon them, right? And even the ones who practiced it didn't even practice it, you know, as they were properly, meaning as they had originally intended to develop it,
Right.
But that idea of living a dedicated religious life, a life dedicated to worshiping God, right, to living a religious life, that I found it actually very attractive. I think the main thing for me, bro, was a no-no was the whole celibacy, right? In order to become a monk, you had to be celibate.
Yeah.
And that was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not gonna, not get married and stuff like that. Like, it did. So a lot of it didn't make sense, but some of it did make sense to me.
I mean, yeah, I think the religious focus, when obviously it was a culture shock for me coming from an urban, non-religious denominational school, going to John Griffith's Roman Catholic school in Wimbledon. And for me, that was interesting because of the level of religiosity that was there as well. Not as much as people saying there, but yeah, we had the morning assembly, the prayers. We would go next door to the church for mass. Sometimes the priest would come in and deliver a lesson and everything. But when I was looking at my notes and the intensity of the notes that I've got here, like I've even got Abdurraheem, I was really proud of this when I found this. I've even got a hand-drawn map that we did of Palestine in the early ages, and I want to show you that.
You drew that, mashallah.
I drew that.
Looks like a proper old ancient manuscript there, bro.
That is of Palestine. We were doing stuff like that and really having the religion embedded in us, and that's why I suppose that transferred to the passion that I had for learning in Islam, as you said, not having studied as much then. And also, I was the top 2 in my whole entire year. So suffice it to say that when I left the school, it wasn't monastery based, but when I left the school, being in a single-sex school all that time when I went to college, we went absolutely wild, being amongst mixed environment and everything.
It happens quite a lot with.
That happens quite a lot when you come out from school. That's right. But I think what you're saying is. But let me ask you this though: the structure, Abdurraheem.
Yeah.
Did the structure of going to such a school, it disciplined us to some extent outside of school until I left religion at that point, but did it help you when you converted to Islam, the structure, that psychological disciplining and conditioning that you had as a Catholic?
I honestly don't know. That's a very, very that's quite a hard question. I think because Catholics still, right, well, certainly when you and me were sort of younger, right, there was still some sort of, discipline left in the Catholic Church. Like there were some things you had to do. Like you had to, you were supposed to go to mass every Sunday, right? You had to go to confession. I don't know what it was. It wasn't that often. I think it was once a year minimum. Like when they said once a year, it was like you were automatically excommunicated. You became a kafir, basically, right? Not a kafir. You left the fold of the church. There's certain things, if you didn't do it, you would actually become automatically excommunicated, right? In the sense that, it's like, it's a bit like the hadith of the Prophet, I guess, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, like the difference between iman and kufr is the salah. So whoever abandons it, you know, does it mean he's a kafir, right? Or is this kufr, right? So, you know, the scholars differed about what the Prophet meant. Is that, did you actually become a disbeliever? Even the Sahaba differed about this, as you know, right? But at least it's an opinion of many of this, even the companions, that if you purposefully abandon your prayer, you leave Islam, right? So there was those type of things. To be honest, I never took them seriously. I never took them seriously because I never took papal infallibility seriously. I never took the church as an institution that seriously at all. So there were lots of things, I guess, you know, from that perspective, what I could read, because one of the things we did do is we actually studied the Bible quite intensely, specifically the Gospel of Mark. I actually probably more or less memorized it. I wouldn't say I memorized it like, you know, a Hufadh of Quran, right? I don't remember it now, but we read it a lot. And yeah, so I found a big discrepancy between the way the monks lived and what I saw Jesus was teaching, right? And it dawned on me that Christianity was more about a religion about Jesus than the religion of Jesus, because there was more about Jesus worshiping him, salvation in believing certain things that he didn't even really teach, right? And not so much of actually trying to act and implement the things that he taught. Because he taught certain manners and certain behaviors, right? There are certain things he said about how a person should behave. And there was very little emphasis on that, right?
Yeah.
There was very little emphasis on, you know, love your enemy and turn the other cheek, and blessed are the meek and blessed are the peacemakers, And, you know, blessed are those who seek justice. Very little of that stuff at all. Very, very little. And of course, there probably wouldn't be, because the Catholic Church is probably one of the most, I say this hesitantly, right? But I do possibly believe that the Catholic Church, and I mean by an institution, I believe in the Catholic Church, there are really good people, genuinely good people, good monks, good priests, good people. But I think as an institution, it is quite possibly the most evil institution in the history of humanity. That's what I say that cautiously, as an institution. Right, the things that it has done, the things that it's been responsible for in terms of massacres, genocides, right, torturing, the Spanish Inquisition, what they did when they invaded, you know, so everywhere. The Philippines, look at the history of what they did in the Philippines. Look what they did in the Spanish Inquisition. Look what the conquistadors did, all in the name of Catholicism, right? Wherever they went, slaughter, death, destruction, forceful conversions. The funny thing is, when you look a lot of the stuff, bro, when they talk about jihad and holy war and they talk about Islam, when you actually study it, they're not talking about Islam. They clearly have never read the Quran, right? They're talking about themselves, their own history. That's what they did. They forcefully converted people at the point of the sword, right?
Absolutely.
That's what they did. Right. And then they presume that, well, and this is it. This is a big, you know, like this is what they do in the West. They think because that's what we did in our religion, your religion must be the same, you know? Anyway, that's totally off topic, bro. But,
no, but it's important, because as you're saying, you said, I liked what you said there. It was a religion about, were they teaching about Jesus, or was it a religion about Jesus or a religion of Jesus? And obviously, Islam is the one that encapsulates the teachings of Isa, Jesus, alayhi salam, alongside the message of all of the Anbiya in that instance. And I think that the reason why I wanted to talk about this today is because not many people, when we talk about pre-conversion, we gloss over very quickly. Now, unless it was a priest and everyone wants to hear what the priest has to say before they converted, or if it's a nun or whatever, we were regular individuals. But look at the level of inculcation that we're actually talking about in our religious instruction as non-Muslims. So it's important that individuals hear that, because now that we are regular Muslims, if you like, the level of religious instruction is and has been far more than what we were learning when we were non-Muslims. And but the question has to be asked, is that the same with Muslims today, the younger Muslims.
Oh, what do you think, bro? You tell me what you think, and then I'll give you my viewpoint on this matter.
I think looking first, I'd say the mode of learning has changed, and then I would say how much of it is actually learning, because no one is sitting, very few, should I say, are sitting and really learning at the feet of someone who's more learned than them. Scholars, even, they would say, scholars are frowned upon. We see that there's a disconnect from bona fide scholars and even students of knowledge. So for me, I feel it's been diluted, and it's been replaced in part by what we now see as edutainment. Even that's a new phrase in it. So is the learning as concentrated? Is it as significant as it needs to be? Because when you look at the Muslims today, do we know the religion? Do we know the tenets of our faith? Do we know how to rebut those doubts as much as we did when we came into the faith? The answer is no. And then let me jump across to Bosnia. Remember when we went into Bosnia, what happened to them? There was erosion over generations of their faith. It was the Balkans conflict that made them reconnect and check their faiths. I'm not saying it's got to that stage now, but there is a dilution for sure.
Yeah, I think, well, in Bosnia, the issue was the communism, wasn't it? It was Tito, and because it was all part of Yugoslavia. And the communists were very, very aggressive in rooting out religion. A little bit like what's happening now with the Uyghur, the Uyghur Muslims in China. You can see this literally attempt to re-indoctrinate them. And if it's anything like, what has happened historically, they will pretty much largely succeed, right?
Yes.
Because all you need to do is, you take the kids away and you re-indoctrinate them. And as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, right, everyone's born upon fitrah. Right. But, your parents, I think if you understand the hadith, it means the environment that you're brought up in changes you, right? So, maybe the elder generation, you can't re-indoctrinate them, but the younger ones, that from what we hear, they're taking the kids away and this and that and put them in these re-indoctrination camps. This is what communism does, right? People talk about, the atheism as if it's some, benign, non-intrusive ideology, and it's absolutely rubbish, right? That's just nonsense, right? I mean, these are self-declared atheist states. They believe that there is no God. That is their religious philosophy, and the evil that has been done in the name of atheism, right, is way, way more than what even Catholicism, to be honest, right? Subhanallah. So we've seen that, and unfortunately, that's what happened in Yugoslavia. It doesn't take long. It really doesn't take long for people to, especially under force and duress, then it doesn't take long for people to lose their deen. But I think the thing is that what is more worrying is that when there's not really any force and there's not any duress, right?
Yes.
Like what is happening in the West, right? Yeah, there may be a bit of pressure, a bit of social pressure. Yes, they may be following Douglas Murray, that right-wing nutcase, Douglas Murray. If he was a Muslim, anyway, so the equivalent, I guess the equivalent of, anyway, I'm not going to mention names, but Douglas Murray, I'll mention his name, particularly nasty piece of work. So he said things like, conditions should be made uncomfortable for Muslims, and he basically said we need to fight them. It should be a hot war, meaning literally we should slaughter them abroad, right? He didn't say those words, but that's what the meaning of what he said. Fight them abroad and have a cold war with them, within the context of Europe. But despite that, and I think that has been in some cases adopted, right? It is still, we are still largely free to practice our religion. I would say that, there are some sections of society, many who don't adhere to that philosophy, and they believe that religion is a good thing. It's a positive thing. It has good influence, and they recognize that. But I think the main danger, Abdul Haqq, bro, is the general, the general irreligiosity of society. People just don't care about religion. They care about having fun. They care about worldly things. It's what we call dunya, right? That's what they care about, right? And to be honest, bro, that's really probably the most dangerous thing of all, right? It won't change people in a generation, like communism just takes a generation. But I think in 4 or 5 or 6 generations, if people have not left Islam totally, I tell you what will happen. The nature of what the Islam they follow will change. And that's all you can see that's happening. Like we're talking, this has happened, bro, with people we know, with people who you are showing us their book.
Give me example.
Well, okay, let's look at Osama Hassan. What's happened? Right? Let's look at the Quilliam Foundation. Let's look at Osama, right? Okay, there's a really, really good example, right? Look at the stuff that he is spouting right now. Like, I don't think any Orthodox, it fits into any category of orthodoxy. You know, like I don't know people who outright call him an apostate and a disbeliever. I'm sure there are some emotional people, but there is a big question, right? And I know in the minds of lots of people, some of the stuff that he's saying, so off the mark, bro. Like totally off the mark. When you start saying we need to reform Islam, you know, we need to change the Quran. I'm not saying he said that we need to change verses of the Quran, right? But this is the sort of stuff that's coming out of Quilliam, right? Majid Nawaz and those type of people. But we're not even talking about the kids or the kids. We're talking about people who themselves were part of, I'm using the sense in the broader sense, the Islamic movement, We could include that everything from Sufis to Palikis to Ikhwanis to, you know, when you say the Islamic movement, I mean anyone who believes in reviving, you know, some sort of idea of authentic Islam, right? Yeah, you understand. So, bro, if you're seeing that happen with people who used to be within the Islamic movement, because they're definitely not anymore, how about the children, right? And no one's forcing them, bro. No one's putting people here in concentration camps and reindoctrination. It's just happening. It's so insidious.
Why do you think that's happening? What do you think that, is there an incentive? I think there is that in some instances, but what do you think it is that's making them shun or dilute the practice of the religion? What do you think it is?
Bro, I think the battle is so hard. Like, you see, this is the thing, right? Is that a lot of people misunderstand. Some people think that they're doing Islam a favor by being Muslim. I genuinely think there are a lot of people
which they're not.
Yeah, they think Islam is favored by my presence. They don't look at Islam as a blessing. Like most people realize that if you want to get money, you have to work flipping hard to get it. You understand, right? You have to work your butt off. If you want to be rich, you have to work hard to be rich. No one has any, you know, and even when you're rich, you have to fight even harder to hang on to it because the government will take it. You know? Like, you know, so it's not any different with your iman, right? You have to fight hard, right? Not only to get your iman, but to hang on to it, right? But this is the misunderstanding. People think Islam, religion generally, they think it's some sort of magic pill or some magic wand. You say a few words and like everything is going to change. It's not like that, right? So this is the problem.
I bring, you know,
go on.
What you're saying that is very true. And I'm for those who may feel, oh, that's a bit harsh coming from us about the changes in individuals that we know, I'm going to bring something. I've actually brought an article because I listened to an example of what you're saying with horror a few years ago. And I'm going to read. This is what was said, by one of the Quilliam after the Pope had said bad souls. This was in 2018. We're talking Easter 2018. Bad souls are not punished. A hell doesn't exist. Now, this is what Majid Nawaz said. I'm going to quote him verbatim because I listened and recorded it. This is what he said, Abdurraheem. How can anyone in this day and age, any person of intelligence, believe in a literal burning hellfire? And so I hope the Pope did say this. And now he's done this great thing of denying a literal burning fire of hell that goes on forever and ever. I think that's a good step in the right direction. But some conservative Catholics are outraged. They're outraged.
Yeah.
They're accusing him in which your skin is roasted alive. This hellfire business cannot be liberal. So I, for one, welcome the Pope's move. And I'll conclude here. You cannot, in all reasonableness, in this day and age, believe such stories. And so thank you, Pope Francis. It's high time Muslims did the same thing and moved from a literal definition of burning fire to a more humane, humanistic, and metaphorical chastisement. Now, that's from the Kulli Majid Nawad, and it speaks to exactly what you said about how can you move from orthodoxy to that. I've quoted him verbatim there, Abdurraheem. So that proves what you're saying. And if you're looking at individuals that were once more orthodox in their practice, moving to that, what hope have we got?
You know what, right? The sheer weight of stupidity of that statement, even from an intellectual point of view, right? I mean, the guy has no intelligence whatsoever, right? I mean, I just want to know what does he mean a less literal? Okay, let's just say there is no actual real physical hellfire. Yeah, let's just say for the sake of argument, right? What does it matter, right? If it's all in your mind, yeah, or your whatever, existence you have, your soul, right? Even if your soul, your body is your body, which doesn't really, let's say your body doesn't exist, right? It is all a metaphysical experience. It doesn't matter. It's still torment.
Yes.
Whether the hellfire actually is a real burning fire or not, right? Or whether someone's plugging some electrodes into my brain, a la the Matrix, yeah, and making you burn like that. What difference does it make? You're still suffering in perpetual torment, right? Khalidina fiha, right? They will dwell therein forever. Like, it is what it is, whether your body is burning or your mind is imagining that your body's burning, or your soul or whatever essence of your being that exists after you die is experiencing this torment. It doesn't really matter this just shows the wishy-washy, fliffy, fluffy bunny flipping nonsense that these people spout, right?
Yes.
And on top of that, we live in a planet, people burn in this planet, people burn in buildings, right? Kids die, people die of horrific diseases, people die of cancer, right? People are suffering in this life. Is that suffering all metaphorical?
Absolutely
not.
That's right.
Absolutely not. Right. But if you believe there's a God, right? God has created this and God lets it happen. He could stop it tomorrow if he wanted to. Like in an instant, God could stop it happening. So there's real physical suffering happening in this life.
Yes.
Right? That means there is a God who lets people suffer. Like you may not like that, but that's it.
Right.
And the most compelling explanation for our universe is that there's a God. The fact that there happens to be suffering has got nothing to do with whether there's a creator or not.
Right.
It does beg the question why, but it shows the inconsistency. There's no consistency in this thinking, right?
Yes.
It's unthinkingly adopted a paradigm that basically makes him feel comfortable with the people he's hanging out with, which just basically goes to what the Prophet said, right? Be careful who you take as your friends, because you will take your deen, you will take your religion from your friends, right? And the hadith that Sheikh Al-Albani told, we all discovered this hadith from him about, the smell of the blacksmith, right?
Yeah.
Whoever lives with a blacksmith, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see that Majid is in some way, he's trying to hang on to some, he knows at the back of his head, Islam sort of makes sense. He knows there's a God. It makes sense to him, right? He knows that having a book that has rules by which you need to live, that's all. Some of this stuff is so deep in one's fitrah. He's like, he could just chuck it all out and say, no, forget it. I'm just an atheist. I don't believe any of this stuff at all. But he finds it very hard to do that because there is a semblance of, like even people like that find it hard to give it up altogether because it has a basis in something deep in our nature, But that's the thing, bro. It's the smell of the blacksmith, bro. That's what it is. You live with a blacksmith, right? And he may make very useful things. A blacksmith makes useful things. He makes shoes for the horses. He makes tools so no one's saying that, useful things do not come out of the society in which we live. Yeah. But with it comes a smoke. Yeah. And you're going to smell that smoke.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
And I think that's the thing. What we forget is the ideal of the Muslim society, and I guess which goes back to your original discussion that you started about schooling and, you know, the atmosphere in which we bring our children up. What we need to do is create an atmosphere of the perfume seller, right? That's what it needs to be. That's honestly, right. The school is not so important about teaching doctrine and history and this and that and, you know, whatever, and these things. It is that the children who go to that school, right, pick up the essence, they pick up the smell, they pick up the perfume, they are imbibed with a beautiful, you know, that beautiful aroma of what the sweetness of faith is. Right. That's what it really needs to be.
Yes.
Right.
And
go on. Yeah, bro. Sorry. You let me talk a lot today, bro. You must be tired or something.
No, I'm enjoying that. I know you weren't sure what I was going to be speaking about, and I'm really pleased with the input that you've given. And what you've said, this underlines everything that we're talking about. That I think the hadith you brought of the blacksmith and the musk seller, beautiful narration. And I remember we love bringing that narration. And when you look now at who the heroes are, and can you remember when we were younger, when we used to be asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we used to read the surveys, and some said they want to be a doctor, an engineer, a scientist. Remember when we were younger, there was a top 10. Replace that now, and people are saying, I want to be a reality star and a YouTube influencer, and all so this comes down to the blacksmith and the must seller. And it may seem, some might say, but the YouTube star is a must seller, I can influence people. No, it's social media serves a particular function, and it has its benefits, undoubtedly. Look at us now with what we're doing. But we've got to look at the flip side of what it's doing to the younger ones' aspirations with their learning. As you know, they can watch something for what? Before it used to be, keep your videos 5 minutes. Yeah. Now it's like a 30-second, what is it, TikTok and all these other ones, which are the shorter attention span. You cannot learn, even if you watch 50 1-minute clips. And this is the problem now. And that's all falls heavily into the camp of the blacksmith, to be honest with you. Yeah. They're going to be tinged with that negativity because of that lack of embedding or embedment of authentic. And I'm not saying go back archaic, but the learning has got to be a lot more substantive than what we're seeing now. And you can see from society, the Muslim communities as well, how far away we are from the actual comprehension of our faith. The visibility is there, and we're jumping up and down when they're arguing about the hijab and niqab, and we support the stance against the banning of hijab and the marginalization and these aspects. But that's all at a superficial identity level. No one's looking at what's taking place underneath. It's the iceberg thing. We're only focusing on what's on the surface, but what's being eroded underneath is far greater, far more important, far bigger than what is on the top.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, bro. And I could mention some controversial subjects around this just to illustrate, that you'll find people who hijabis, right, involved in politics and, strongly supporting the whole, LGBT agenda, right?
I've had a big on that. Yeah, I've been having, not on that, but some brothers were saying by connection, and this is an interesting point. They're saying you can't support. There's a particular da'i in America who's supporting a politician who's on that particular instance. So by extension, further down the chain, this individual shouldn't support this brother because he's supporting that individual. And I haven't looked at that issue in itself, but yeah, the support of LGBT, like I saw a discussion with Jonathan Brown, and the premise on what he discussed was completely wrong. And I actually highlighted, no, just because you're being supported by a particular movement or Muslims are being supported by a particular movement doesn't mean by extension we now need to reciprocate. Actually, we have an identity that can stand on its own. And I would say that about Black Lives Movement as well.
See, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was supported by his uncle, right? His uncle supported him. But his uncle did it on the basis of what? Of tribalism. right? I mean, that's what they did in those days. If you're from my tribe, I support you. I mean, to be fair, Abu Tayyib did actually believe that what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was teaching was true. He just actually never embraced Islam. He even believed it was true, right? But he refused to change based upon his tribalism, right? Based upon his, people are going to say, I abandoned the religion of my ancestors, right? So his whole motivation was this tribalistic motivation. So the Prophet accepted his support, but he never agreed, with tribalism. He never agreed with polytheism, right?
No.
So you can accept support from someone without agree. And you know what? At the end of the day, if people based on their principles are ready to give support, right? I would, there's all sorts of things I would support people for, right? And I may not agree. There's many things I might support Catholics about. There may be many things that people who are LGBT or people, race issues, I would support various issues, right? Without necessarily agreeing to everything connected with them, right? Because I have my principles that I stand up for. If I see some person getting beaten up in the street, I don't care. You could be gay, you could be Catholic, you could be a Jew, right? It doesn't make any difference to me, right? I'm going to come and I'm going to do my best to help you, right? Because that's my principle. If I see someone robbing you, I'm going to come and defend you. Because that's my principle, is to stand up, for truth and to stand up for justice. And if you say, I'm not expecting you to follow my religion. I'm not going to expect you to support me to build my local mosque because of that, right? No, I don't expect that at all. I'm just doing it because I believe that's the right thing that I have to do.
Yes.
Right?
Good. And this is right. This is the right way. This is the right approach. My issue, I would say, no, it's not even an issue. I think I agree entirely with what you're saying there. I think it's the expectations that we have with one another. Like, say, for example, I disagreed with you. It would be fine for us to disagree on that particular issue. But if then I was trying to really convince you around to my way and say, no, the way you're on is wrong, and bring in religious edicts to chastise you in that particular instance, whereas in what you've said is perfectly justifiable from the perspective you said, it would be unreasonable of me to adopt that particular approach. And I think that understanding...
I don't know, bro. You tell me, right? Does anyone appreciate that sort of duplicity? Because that's what I think it is. Isn't it a bit duplicitous?
Wait,
right?
What exactly is duplicity?
Well, like, let's just say for the issue of LGBT, right? That, Orthodox Islam, Orthodox Muslims, it's been held throughout our religion, even Christianity. As far as I know, every religion, that homosexuality, for example, the practice of it, I'm not going to get into the controversy of whether being a homosexual, in the sense of you have those overwhelming impulses, right? Let's not get into the discussion whether that's nature or nurture, right? I guess if a person believes that's the way they are, right? Okay, fine. You believe that's the way you are. That's not my business, right? The business is like, how does a person, or the business, I suppose, from the spiritual perspective, is how do you act upon it? Because this is what I explain to people from all of us, right? Life is a test, right? I may feel like having a different girlfriend every day, right? Can I do that in Islam? No, I can't, right? Islam does not allow that, because we have certain limitations that Allah has put on us, right? And that's what it's about. So do you think someone from the LGBT community, right, appreciates us being duplicitous, appreciates us hiding, or somehow, what's the word, obfuscating? My dad know the word right off, right? Like the truth of what our faith teaches us about that? I don't think so.
No, I don't either. That's why that's the point. This is my point. I believe personally, I respect what you said about helping in particular or supporting in particular instances if someone was being beaten up. I agree with you on all of that. But when, like, for example, this argument that Dr. Jonathan Brown brought, and he got slated for it, and I read the article that he wrote, and the counter argument was very good against what he was saying. And he was saying there's a common cause, and so therefore the Muslims should come together with LGB for this common cause. And I say again, my perspective, and you can disagree.
But what's the common cause you're talking about, bro?
No, I'll explain. Let me tell the common cause he was mentioning. It was actually to do with a specific issue, which I said, no, you can't conflate the two. I was saying this is wrong. He was saying it was to do with marriage and how Christian Western American society views LGBT and same-sex marriage, and how they view Muslim marriage in the same context. So therefore the fight should be won. And I like many of us is like, no way, absolutely not. You cannot conflate the two, because a common opponent puts you both in the same basket. This comes back to what I was saying earlier on, and I know you agreed with me on that as well. I was saying you can't do that. Too many times we see issues conflated and diluted. So the Muslim issue should stand alone. I really believe that. And that's why, like I said again, with Black Lives Matter, when they're talking about the movement, I don't agree with the movement, because the movement subscribes to that very position and advocates that very position that Dr. Jonathan Brown was pushing. That's why it's disagreeable. It cannot be accepted. Black Lives Matter, the issue, the cause, needs to stand on its own. No conflation with LGBT, gay, white, this, green, what? No, just the Black Lives Matter issue, the cause of what's being done to black people. The Muslim issue, be it niqab, be it Muslim marriage, be it whatever, needs to stand alone. And so I know some will I'll come under a lot of criticism for that, but this conflation, this dilution is the issue. So what you're saying, I agree with. And there is duplicity there, because if you're going to say, I will support you on this, and you know your faith does not advocate this, there's an element of duplicity, dare I say hypocrisy, in you doing that, in you saying, I will do this for this cause, while my faith speaks against it. We cannot do that.
I think it's a very interesting discussion, bro, which would go on for a long, long time. Yeah. But it's a problem I personally identified myself with many causes, right? Even, for example, the environmental movement, right?
Okay.
Yeah, like even you look at Labour, for example. You look at Labour as a political party, right? You look at its foundational ideas and its foundational principles, right, which are basically rights for workers, right? But so many other issues have become absorbed in what makes a person think of themselves as being, a member of the Labour Party, right? So similarly with the environmental movement, right? Like there's no reason really, right, why you couldn't be, suppose a capitalist and be interested or concerned about the environment, right? You could, but it's almost impossible in the minds of people. It's like you have to be some socialist, or you have to be some, like even the environmental movement has almost got a sort of bad name for itself as, tree huggers and hippies and stuff like that, right? Whereas in fact, the reality of saving our planet from destruction, so we our children and our children's children can have some sort of semblance of a normal life, like some standard of actually being able to live, right, instead of suffer hugely, should concern everybody. It doesn't matter what your background is. And so whether your support of that cause should not be conditional upon whether I'm a Muslim or not, or whether I'm a Christian or not. This is the thing for me, right? I support certain issues I support the environmental movement, right? I don't bring yes, when it comes to Muslims, I'll bring Islam into it, but I don't think I should bring my Islam into it and, necessarily, right? I mean, on a bigger scale, I do believe philosophically that Islam is going to be the only solution for it. But this is the problem, bro. See, a lot of people, I guess what they do is when they attach themselves to a certain cause, right, along with it comes their political thinking, their philosophical thinking, right? And they're going to mix it all up. And I guess that's it. At the end of the day, you got to stand for what you stand for, right?
It's the expectations.
You got to say what you believe. But we know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, we know from the Hilf al-Fudail and how the Prophet said, you know, that if they ask me to do it again, I'll do it again. So there's certain things that you do even with a mushrik. You unite with them, right? When it comes to certain issues of social justice, when it comes to certain issues of fairness in dealings and, not robbing people and making sure that when a trade deal is conducted, the person is paid for their, for the exchange of goods. Right. This doesn't necessarily need to be done under the auspices of Sharia or whatever. Right. It's a common interest for everybody. Right. But I don't know what are those issues, bro. It's difficult, isn't it?
Social justice. I think that what you said there, that's the key denominator. That's the key. Social justice around the issues of social justice. Yes. Then
some people would argue that, people being free to live their life according to whatever sexual preferences they have, as long as they are, they're not, as long as there's, as they call it, mutual consent. Isn't it? That's the liberal philosophy. They would say that's social justice.
No one's objecting to that. No one's objecting. What I'm saying, the only thing I'm saying is everything you've said I subscribe to and can subscribe to. It's conflating, it's this dilution that these causes overlap and are one in the same. That is an issue for me, because then
I think the interesting thing is, bro, it's problematic for the cause. That's what I think. Like I often think, look, if you really care about the environment, that's what you care about. Just stick to that. Don't bring other stuff into it.
Right.
Don't bring, like, I don't know what, animal rights. Okay. Like, okay, you may argue that being a vegetarian is good for the environment. Fine. That's your point. Right. But the issue of animal rights and, like, I'm not saying that animals shouldn't have rights. Do you understand? I'm not saying that.
No, exactly.
But what's that specifically got to do with protecting the environment?
Right.
You understand? Like, keep to your lane, right? If this is your cause, stand up for your cause and make it clear. Don't make it that in order to support your cause, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this and that all together in one go. Why?
Yeah. And compromise this, compromise that. Yeah. And then it all becomes obscured and the direction is no longer clear. And so, we're on exactly the same page there. And it
becomes a whole nother cause altogether.
Yes.
Black Lives Matter doesn't become Black Lives Matter. It becomes, I don't know, something totally different that's not even to do with black people anymore.
Yes, that's right.
And it's happened, bro. It's happened with... Bro, let's go back to Christianity. The message of Jesus, original true message of Jesus, was to worship Allah alone.
Yes.
Right? But it all changed and it became a religion of worshiping Jesus along with Allah.
Yes.
What could be more opposite than that?
And see, that's what, as you said, as we're drawing to the end of the thing, I was going to say that faith matters. This is the beautiful thing about the deen. Allah told us in Surah Ma'idah, this day I've perfected your faith for you, your religion for you. And so when we're looking at our faith, we have got the parameters within which to navigate, negotiate, align ourselves. You mentioned the Hilf al-Fudul, which is an Abu Talib as a non-Muslim supporting Islam. Everything we've mentioned is there. And if we knew how to reference these, if we knew how to adopt these, I was reading today in Sahih Bukhari, and I've contacted a student of knowledge about this, and I read a hadith. There were two Sahabiyat who'd gone on the first hijrah to Ethiopia, and one of them, their husband had embraced, he left Islam, and he embraced Christianity and stayed in Ethiopia. So when when he died, the Prophet ﷺ asked for her hand in marriage. Now, the key thing about this for me was this individual apostated in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
There was nothing about he should be killed, he should be put to death, nothing. When he died, natural causes, okay, the Prophet ﷺ then asked for her hand in marriage. So I asked the student of knowledge, I said, are there any lessons we can take from this? Because we hear this rhetoric in the West that someone's left Islam and suddenly it's like They need to be executed. They need to be this needs, and they're in fear, or they're using that as a propaganda, because you don't actually hear it from the Muslims. You hear it from, oh, they're telling me I'm going to be put to death.
Right. No, okay. So the ex-Muslims are claiming that they're getting all these death threats and this and that, which is very unlikely. I don't think there's very, very, very few, if any, Muslims who, I mean, like no one with knowledge, you would say that they're allowed to do that.
And this narration is proof of that. This hadith that I read was proof of that. You did hear the Prophet say, send the people, tell the niggers to bring him. Nothing like that whatsoever. So sometimes you'll see that I think there will be that counter narrative and that propaganda against Islam from those who have left. But my point that I'm making here is faith matters in what instance, Abdurraheem? In every instance. We just looked at some common contemporary issues, and you've cited off examples from the religion that show how the Prophet ﷺ acted in those instances, and therefore, by extension, the examples we can take and how we can act. But what does it come back down to? Imagine now, you know this. How many other Muslims know this? How many other Muslims have studied this? How many Muslims know how to negotiate and navigate through the contemporary issues that are taking place today? If they don't have the knowledge, if they're not studying their religion. And I'm not saying they have to be scholastic, okay? Thank you, Shema. Love your show. We love you being here with us. And yes, Abdurraheem and I will always have these open discussions. We were having them 30 years ago when we used to travel together. But thank you for that. So Abdurraheem, so my thing is this. We need to return and inculcate in the younger generation. And they do have an identity, but they need to, I think, raise the bar, step up a notch with the learning, because they will see how comprehensive the faith is. And also an important thing as well, contextualizing the knowledge of the deen, because it's a deen for all ages, all places, all time, in how to apply it today, but not off the tops of our own heads, not with some of these outrageous statements I've just read to you from Maj in the West. We need, if we don't know, as we know, ask the people of knowledge. If we don't know, we need to identify who they are. We have some amongst us. We have some abroad, many abroad. Contextualize and then act. This is very important.
Absolutely, bro.
And you nodded silent. I know.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I think it was a good conclusion, bro. It's a good conclusion. Not much to add to that. It was a very, very interesting discussion. You know, I'm feeling a bit, I'm not sure what I said about the Catholic Church was, like I did say, I'm not saying definitively I think they are the most evil institution on the, you know, I mean, that maybe that's a little bit too far. Sometimes I admit I read certain things and get super emotional. Like I remember when I went to the Philippines recently, you know, when I started hearing the history of, because the Philippines used to be a Muslim, it used to be all Muslim, right?
Right.
And actually, it's interesting that the hero of Cebu Island, I think his name is Tapu Tapu, right? And he's basically a Muslim mujahid who fought against the Spanish. So like they have as their hero this Muslim guy who fought against the Spanish. So, but the way that the Philippines was, you know, Islam was almost wiped out in the Philippines. It's horrific, bro. And you see what they did and the way they treated people, and it was literally, you know, nothing really short of the Spanish Inquisition and conversion. It wasn't exactly conversion at the point of the sword, but it basically was not much short of that. It's literally, either you became Catholic or you couldn't live practically, right? So basically, unless you converted to Catholicism, you couldn't buy, you couldn't sell, you couldn't trade, you couldn't do anything. You could maybe go and live in the jungle, right, where they couldn't get you anyway. I mean, that's it. You could have no real civil life to speak of, right? Let alone, the way they tortured people and killed them and so on and so forth. When you read this type of stuff, you know, when you hear about this type of stuff, you think, what on earth, right? These are the people who claim to be following Jesus, and they talk about love and they talk about peace. How can that Pope stand there and say anything, right? Let him renounce the Catholic Church. Let him denounce the Catholic Church beginning to end and totally reform it. Yeah, not reform it, demolish it. Because honestly, Like, its history is horrific. It's really, really horrific, you know. And I struggle sometimes to think about, like,
But
apart
even
from
recent, let's look at the last 30, 40 years, and that's another horrific history with what we were seeing unearthed with the abuse.
well, the whole flipping pedophile thing, right?
Absolutely.
The whole priests, and, like, you know, they've destroyed religion in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
It was the most Catholic place on earth, right?
Yes.
When you and me, right, when we first became Muslim, you know, it was like going to Ireland, the Irish Republic, was like not like going to anywhere else.
No,
Yeah?
that's right.
There was freedom of religion, but not like in England, right? In
Yes.
England, you could, like, there you had to be more cautious, right? And I remember when I went there, a priest was basically saying, "Your guests here, don't think, you know, you're going to be free to practice your religion the way Catholicism." He basically more or less said that, right?
Okay.
Your guests behave like guests, yeah?
Right.
Now, most of flipping Ireland is, you know, most of them are like atheists. They don't believe because of what happened.
Right.
You know,
right.
Because of that. Abortion's illegal, gay marriage is legal, you know, all that. And it was so Catholic. What happened?
And that's a lesson.
You know,
there's a lesson there.
it's a big lesson, a very, very
because
big lesson.
Among us, the same dilution is taking place, and you're seeing individuals saying, "We are."
But you know, here, bro, the problem is not dilution. The problem is the corruption of the clergy. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's when the institution is corrupt and people can see it is corrupt. And when there is more corruption than good, people will take a bit of corruption. They'll know that, you know, you've always got a few bad apples. It doesn't matter. You can have a barrel full of saints, right? You're going to have one or two rotten apples. But when the whole flipping barrel is looking rotten, and you can hardly find a fresh apple, people are going to chuck the barrel out. And this is a very big lesson for us in the Muslim world as well, right?
Yeah, and to speak to that, I was talking with some colleagues today. I'm talking about going back to learning and everything, but there's a caveat that I think needs to be said, because there's some shocking things coming out from the abuse that can take place amongst the Muslim seminaries, if you want it in that sense.
Yeah.
And that's horrific, because when you've got children growing up saying, I cannot listen or recite a verse of Quran anymore because what was being done to me while I was being told to recite this verse. While we're talking about knowledge, and we'll put this out there, and Abdurraheem, maybe we have to address that, and I'll say clearly now, those who are in those positions of authority and parents need to ensure that their children, when learning, the youngsters when growing up and learning, this has got to be a pleasant experience. We've mentioned the Catholic Church, but we've got to make sure that what is taking place in Islam, amongst Muslims, not Islam, amongst Muslims, we need to check ourselves very carefully.
And the other thing, bro, is not to tolerate it. This idea that you just cover it up, you know, some Maulana or some whatever, some abusing some boy, abusing some girl, flipping molesting children. And the whole thing is, I've heard this, by the way. I have heard this guy from someone who says, "Oh, our elders decided it was better to keep it quiet and cover it up," and the guy's still teaching until today. Until today, like, it's like, what did you? What been? You know, you. What is your name? Ostrich?
Yeah.
Like, are you not seeing what's going on?
It's a reality. This is a reality, and we say now, and I'm put this out here now. Those who are doing that with whatever ability the rest of us have, you're not going to be doing it for much longer. No child should be growing up abhorring the religion or listening to the Quran because of abuse that has been taking place in whatever household or religious class that they're supposed to be in. We're talking here about faith matters. We're talking here about learning the deen, but we're not doing that in a vacuum, that we know that some of these abuses are taking place. And I was speaking to colleagues earlier on, brothers earlier on, about this. And what's got to be made clear is that it's intolerable, and action will start being taken, Abdurraheem, at some point to address this. And I think on this point, it's a very sober note to end, but I'll end again. Faith absolutely matters in these instances as now. And we've got to make sure that we move away from following in the footsteps of other faiths that have used their positions of religiosity for abuse and wrong treatment, maltreatment, malpractice.
Yeah. Ameen, may Allah protect us, bro.
Ameen, and our children. Ameen. And we will end on that sober note. And I'll say again to every viewers, thank you. It's been a very frank discussion as usual between Abdurraheem and myself. That's Abdurraheem Green.
That's Abdul Haqq Baker, and this is
a piece of cake.
Until next week.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, bro. Good to see you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Don't forget to share this.